You guys to move it. Either I have to back up, which I can do.
Why don't we turn the table this way?
Okay.
So we're in the
Well, I can back you up. Yeah, that's things you are a little bit separated. But you remember what we had last time? Is the table was in the back, honey?
Oh yeah.
But if you're gonna use the laptop. Yeah, but so if I turn off, then I have to start over again.
All right.
Hold on.
So we are counting down to start.
Hello. Okay. Right.
Welcome back. This is Metaphysically Speaking with Mystic Madison, and I am here today with a special guest. Thank you for coming back, by the way. We are doing a really amazing show today about astrology. And I think we decided to, or, I pitched the idea that we were going to do Dissecting Pluto in Capricorn, but there's a lot of people that may not know about astrology. So I wanted to have a guest on the show that is an astrology expert. I want to introduce Richard Simon Kahn.
Hello.
He came all the way from Atwater Village from the Crystal Matrix, and he is going to be telling the viewers today a couple of things, actually. We're going to be talking about what astrology is, the different types of astrology that people get interested in. And I think the best, most exciting part of the show is really, astrologically speaking, what's happening today. There's a lot of stuff happening today in the world. There's a lot of stuff happening today in our nation. And I thought this was the best time to kind of bring you on prior the election, if I could say that.
Is there an election happening?
And I thought it'd be really amazing to figure out what makes things go the way they go. And but let's back up a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about what astrology is, because people, I think most people, I think just about everybody kind of knows basic astrology. Like, they know how to read their horoscope. They know what their signs are, because people can follow based on their times of, their dates of birth and their months of the year. But I don't think they really have, there may not even be an awareness that not just personally, but the earth and our country also has a birth time, because astrology is based on a birth time.
Exactly.
So our country actually, how does our country even have a birth time?
Okay, well, why don't we step back to your first question, which is looking at what is a birth chart? What is the astrology about? And I think that's a very good place to start. And so, for instance, I'd like to share with your viewers here. This is an astrological chart. This is a birth chart with some additional planets on it. But here, just so you can get a look at that the chart is divided into 12 houses, which represent different fields of experience. And there's a bunch of symbols that are in there that represent mostly planets. And those planets represent qualities that are within us. And this is why the astrology works, is that what the birth chart really shows is it's like a snapshot of what each of us as a soul incarnating on the earth had in mind for this experience, and what we're learning, what we've brought with us, and what we're learning, and kind of the strategy that we're going to use in order to achieve the things that we want to achieve. And so that's what the birth chart really represents. That's the reason that it works, is that there is a connection between our energies. This is really all about energetics. This is higher level.
Right.
This is why it's metaphysical.
Yes.
Okay? This is right, metaphysically speaking.
Right.
That's why it is really metaphysics. It's not about the physical planets. It's about the energy of the planets, and it's about our energies and how they are interconnected. And that's what astrology is really revealing, is what the connections are. and then how we're being influenced by it.
Now I noticed on this particular chart that is that something you did? There's a lot of different types of colors on this chart. Is that symbolic in any way?
Yeah, well, it is. Those colors actually represent each of the astrological signs. There are 12 signs, as most of your viewers know, I'm sure, that there are 12 signs from Aries, starting with Aries, which is a fire sign, and so it's shown in red here on this chart. Aries is down here.
So red for fire.
Red for fire,
Yes.
yeah. In this particular chart, the way I print these charts, it's done according to the elements. So that when we look at this, again, let's go in there for your viewers to see that that when we look at this, that the fire signs are shown in red. So there are 3 signs that are fire signs: Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. Those are the fire signs. Then moving this way, we have the earth signs are shown in green on this particular chart. The air signs are shown in light blue, and the water signs are shown in dark blue. And so the signs go around the wheel, starting with Aries and ending up with the sign Pisces. So the first house is ruled by the sign Aries, and so on, going all the way around until we get to the 12th house, which is ruled by Pisces. And that's the basic setup. Each of these houses represents a field of experience. Certain things are associated with it. And by placement, when there's planets there, that shows a particular emphasis on those types of experiences, talents, abilities, and challenges. And that's how the interpretation part of astrology works. So that's the basics.
So then can I ask you, so would our country have a chart that looks like this?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, because a birth chart can be created for any entity that has a known time of beginning. So usually astrology is used for people.
Yeah, which has a beginning. We
Yes,
all have a beginning.
We all have a beginning. Sometimes we don't know exactly what time, though, right? That's a challenge.
True. That's
that
true.
can be a challenge, but
Right.
But still, we did have a beginning, and there was planetary energy there. So whether we know the time or not, that energy is there and it's working. But in order to create the astrological chart, yes, we need to know the time. So that could be done for people, it could be done for a business, or it could be done for a country.
So what would be the time for the U.S.? Would it be July,
Yes.
4th, 1776?
As we celebrate every year. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so even though people were here before, you take when it was kind of proclaimed.
Exactly, because
Interesting.
there was a conscious intent to define the government and the nation as an entity, and that's why it's usable astrologically. That it has a specific purpose and a specific time, and so that works for the United States, and it works, for a business. The same thing. If people have consciously decided to start a business, then there is a time when the papers are filed or when the decision is made to move forward with that company. So
That's interesting.
astrology can be done for that.
Well,
So
I
for
think-
the United States,
yeah.
for instance, we have sorry, I don't have this one in color, but the United States birth chart I have here, and so that you can see it anyway.
Wow. Yeah, I can
Wanna
see it.
Move it towards the camera.
And there's a lot of planets on one side of that chart versus the other. I can see
Yes,
that right
well,
away.
it tells, again, every birth chart tells a very interesting story about the person or the entity that's coming into being. And the United States birth chart, this chart is based on what they call the Sibley chart, because a guy named Sibley helped to figure out when the timing was, but it's based at 5:10 p.m. in Philadelphia on July 4th, 1776, because he figured, as a historian, that was when the signing of the Declaration of Independence was finally ratified. That's when they got it all together, that everybody agreed, okay, yes, I will sign this. All of the delegates agreed they were going to sign it. And so
Interesting.
that was the birth.
Interesting. Yeah, so I think you did a great job answering the first question. Like, how is personal astrology, or my chart and your chart and everybody else's chart, different than the country's astrology? And also, I think hopefully this will lead us to our next subject is how can we predict in a way what is going to happen now based on a chart to a society or to, I mean, I'm hoping that things will come into a kind of toned down, a little bit more peaceful time, maybe, if I can say that. But maybe this is a good time to tell people that to just kind of reintroduce that our show's about astrology. And before we go into the next segment,
That'd be good.
and if you like this subject and you like this astrological point of view and you want to follow what we're doing, please send us a heart. So send us a heart. Okay. So
All right. Well, very good question here, Madison. And predictions. There's lots of different ways to do predictions, and it's a vast subject, and it gets very complex. But I'd like to focus on one particular thing that's pertinent to us in this time period, and that is in the United States chart. We have the planet Pluto is located.
mhm.
I'll show your viewers in
Yeah.
a second. The planet Pluto is located in the second house of the United States chart. And here for all of you to see.
So that's the second house.
This is the second house
Right.
down here, and this is a sign for the planet Pluto, the symbol for the planet Pluto.
Mhm.
And so Pluto is in the second house of the U.S. chart. Pluto represents the energy of enterprise and it shows, first of all, that the United States is a country. There's in the psyche of the country, there is a very strong emphasis on building wealth. The second house has to do with wealth, income, finances,
Right.
and values.
Right. I know that from my own chart and from looking at, that each, I guess the first house would be how we see ourselves. The second house would be wealth and money and maybe material goods.
Yeah, material goods,
Right.
and acquiring them, and how important it is to us, and how we go about acquiring them. And again, I'm reading the astrological chart for the United States the same
Yes.
way as I would for a person.
Right. Right.
And so, looking at this, and the planet Pluto represents a concentration of energy and power, and it also represents, to a certain degree, an obsession. That where Pluto shows up in the birth chart, it usually indicates that a person has not just an attachment to something, but they are somewhat obsessed with obtaining or experiencing wherever Pluto is showing up.
So I've heard that Pluto equates to power. So
it's one of its aspects.
So is it safe to say that maybe that obsession is just, that's where power gets played out in a person's chart or in the chart of the US?
It depends where it's showing up in the chart, what its relationship is with other planets.
Okay.
But yes, Pluto definitely represents power. It's often, Pluto is associated with the subterranean parts of the psyche, with the more collective unconscious parts.
Interesting.
That which is hidden, that which is, Pluto is the lord of the underworld. He's
Right.
the god of death and the
Right.
god of the underworld. And so his power and everything is kind of kept behind the scenes. You don't see him operating. He's not out there in
Right.
the daylight. He's
Right.
working at night, and he's working behind closed doors. There's secrecy involved. Pluto is the ruling planet of Scorpio. And so there's this secrecy element. There's this covert element to it that's very significant when you start looking at, especially in this time period, we're seeing, okay, how does the United States acquire its wealth? How does it acquire its finances? And we're starting to realize that, oh my God, there has been so much covert stuff going on
Wow.
all over the world, not just in this country, that we've got our fingers in stuff all over the world. And, the CIA and the NSA and all these other.
And that's because Pluto, right now, this is for today.
This is the birth chart.
Oh, that's
I'm
the
just
birth
talking
chart.
about the
Okay.
birth chart.
Okay,
No.
so that's because Pluto's in the second house.
And it's
Got it.
in the second
of the
house
birth chart of the
finances
US.
and wealth and
Interesting.
the use of power, how power is used, and just the fact that Pluto is is the nature of Pluto is to do things secretly. It's got a very secretive element to it.
And this
so,
has been like a running theme
this
in
has
our
been
country
a running theme.
because
If you
it's
go
in the
back,
birth chart.
if you look at
I
the
see.
history of the United States and you go back, the one of the things there was a historian, a European historian, I think his name was Alex de Turbeville or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but he came and he visited the United States like 20 years after the United States declared its independence. And then he wrote about the United States. And one of the things that he was so impressed him and amazed him and disgusted him was that he said everybody is chasing the dollar.
Right.
That these Americans are just money hungry. That they are everything
Interesting.
is driven by their desire to gain profit.
Interesting.
And that was back in around 1800.
So I'm also wondering if we should also bring up that, like, now that Pluto's in Capricorn, that started in 2008. So we've started a new chapter of discovering our Pluto all over again in a different way, because it entered Capricorn in 2008 and it is there until 2023, 2024. But just to kind of get people to understand how these segments get tied together, before that, I think, now I'm not sure about the dates, you would know better than me, but I think from 96 until 2007, Pluto was in Sagittarius,
Right.
which was a time of abundance, because Sagittarius has a very different personality than Capricorn. If you take your Sag friends versus your Capricorn friends, those are two kind of polar opposites. Before that, and I don't remember the dates again, but prior to 96, maybe 95, Pluto was in Scorpio, and that
1984 to 1996.
Yes, so that had its own, you can see how you can actually see why generations are so different, because people come of age under different influences that the planet is kind of cycling through, and that becomes their reality, which is different than maybe their parents' reality and their grandparents' reality. So since this is called Dissecting Pluto in Capricorn, and maybe we can talk about how, from 2008 until now, and what I was hoping, it's all going to be conjecture. It is a guess. Once again, my name is Mystic Madison at Metaphysically Speaking with Mystic Madison, and this is Richard Simon Kahn, who is a very interesting astrologer. He definitely goes under the surface and does very many different types of astrology. And please send us a heart if you're interested in the topic. Please follow us, because we're going to be on every show. We're going to be doing interesting things, and if you'd like to come back, we could look at another situational time. But I'd really like to kind of understand what happened in 2008. Like, where was the shift?
Well, you brought up something really good, Madison. And so before I go into that, because I'm prepared for that.
Okay.
But you brought up a really good point, and that is you were talking about the generational influence of the planets, and there are a couple of generational planets. Well, Pluto is definitely one of them, because it takes Pluto approximately 13 to 19 years to pass through one sign of the zodiac. And so over the course of that time, there are millions of people who are born with, for instance, Pluto in Scorpio or Pluto in Sagittarius.
Right.
And so that represents one channel of energy that people are drawn to and are
that
expressing.
becomes expressed in their lives.
That's right.
Definitely.
And they have an orientation to that energy. So that's one factor in terms of looking at the bigger picture of society. And then the other thing is that all the people who are already active and of age, let's say in their teens or older, they're out in the world doing things, and they're influenced by that energy at that time as well. So you have kind of a dual effect happening there, that you have like a new generation that's being seeded and that really embodies that energy. And then you have the older or prior generations who are receiving that energy and reacting to that according to their understanding of things. they may be reacting positively and welcoming it and saying this is great, or they may be resisting it and feeling like this is terrible. What's going on? This didn't happen when I was young. We didn't do things like that. So it works both ways. But that's an interesting dynamic to understand how astrology affects the generations as well.
Yeah, I think people get it. It's not just being generationally different. It's not just about either growing up with technology or not, or what you watched on TV or not. It's really about the trends that we are influenced by. But yeah, I always thought that was the most interesting thing about astrology.
Yeah, and people bring, as a result of having millions of people born with a certain astrological element, it brings things into being in society. For instance, right now, one of the things that's been current over the last 10 years is we've had the Neptune in Capricorn generation. Okay.
Oh, okay.
And Neptune is a very mystical planet. Neptune rules Pisces. It's tuned into the spiritual. It's intuitive. It's artistic, and brings great sensitivity. But in Capricorn, it brings it down to earth. It wants practical experience of that sensitivity and of that spirituality. It doesn't just want a bunch of ideas, and it's not content. The people who have that placement aren't content to just read some books, Shirley MacLaine Out on a Limb and all this. Oh, this is so cool. Yeah, I love this, and no, that's not enough for them. They want to experience it themselves. And so what we've seen, one of the expressions of that in our time over the last 10 years is the tremendous explosion of the practice of yoga.
Yes.
Because yoga provides the integration of the spiritual side and the sensitivity and the awareness of Neptune.
Yes.
Where you're tuning in, you're being aware of what's going on in your consciousness, physically, in terms of your mind, in terms of your spirit. And then you have the practical outlet, the practical structure that yoga provides for people as a practice. And as a result, people get in and they're practicing with Hatha yoga, for instance. They're practicing yoga. It's helping them physically to become centered. And then they become aware that of their thought processes, and gradually are able to look at that. And then they realize, as their thoughts settle down, they realize, well, wait, I'm experiencing something else besides my thoughts. I'm aware of myself in a different way. And many yoga teachers will introduce meditation into their practice in some way, have a 1-minute meditation at the end.
Yeah.
People start discovering and connecting with an experiential spirituality that is very practical, and yet it's very spiritual.
Yeah.
This is Neptune in Capricorn, and this is how one of the ways. This is a very nice example to show of how these things manifest in society.
You see waves and trends, and it's just so interesting that we are under the influence of the planets.
Yeah.
Is that the right way to put it?
We're driving under the influence, yes.
But yeah, so I have to say, well, I'm a Sagittarius. I mentioned it before, and I don't know if I'm more sensitive because when Pluto was in Sagittarius, it was such a happy time, or if it has to do with my sign. But I definitely noticed a really huge drop, like a huge difference when Pluto went into Capricorn. I mean, it was really monumental for me. It was like one day I woke up and things felt different, and I started seeing that reflected in a lot of different ways. So is this kind of what is going to continue until it goes into Aquarius, which is another segment? Or and what is it? What are we supposed to learn? I mean, everything is there for us to learn. So what is Pluto and Capricorn trying to teach us?
It's huge. It's huge.
I think that's a good question.
Yeah. Well, let's start with let's go back and look at when Pluto went into Capricorn. When that was starting to happen. I have a couple of charts here.
Okay. I'm going to grab my water.
So we have here December 2007. I've created a chart for that.
Wow.
Because this is the official beginning of the Great Recession, according to a published report doing a timeline on the Great Recession.
Right.
And I chose that because the Great Recession coincided with Pluto shifting out of Sagittarius and moving into Capricorn.
And what was the date of that shift?
And the exact date of that shift. The
Because
exact.
I think I'm going to go back to sleep and try to go back in time.
Well, we're on a growth cycle, so
Yeah.
you're here for that. That's
Yes,
part of it.
Of course.
The exact date. Let's see. I don't have the exact date right here, do I?
But it was around. I guess
It was in 2007.
Okay.
It
Well,
was-
that was just leading up to 2008.
Or let's see,
so.
2007, 2008. It was actually in 2008. I'm sorry. It's like in April of 2008.
Okay.
But because it was already, there was energy already moving into Capricorn with Pluto, that things were lining up here, and so as a result, we had a lot of different things going on in the United States chart, and I think well, let me just show you this. This is the chart that shows what was going on at the time. Exactly, this was December 12th, 2007, and just 2 months earlier, on October 9th, 2007, the stock market hit an all-time high with the Dow Jones Industrials at 14,164. And then right after that, there was this huge market crash. The bubble burst, and by the end of October, the Bush administration was setting aside $700 billion to bail out the banks
Right.
and all these other institutions. And so this was really the initiation. This was the beginning of Pluto and Capricorn. This was the shadow of that. Just the vibratory energy of that. Pluto was so strong that it was involved in all of these different aspects, which I don't know if we want to take the time for me to try to explain on the show. That's
I
a
think
little too
it might be in depth, but I think it really helps to I think what you did was great, because I think it gives people an overall sense of that Pluto and Capricorn is it's a little bit more austere, I guess, than Pluto and Sag.
Well, here's what's going on. That Pluto moving into Capricorn, Capricorn is a sign that has to do with structure. It has to do with organization and government,
Yes.
and how things are organized and managed. And it's an Earth sign, so it's dealing with practical stuff. And Pluto coming in there is particularly in the United States chart, it's coming in and it's bringing to the surface the things that have been suppressed in the national
you had
consciousness.
said before that Pluto brings up what's kind of buried.
Yes.
So that makes sense.
It's got like a volcanic element to
Yeah.
it that it pushes things to the surface, and so that Pluto is really, in terms of evolution, Pluto is a very key evolutionary planet, and its purpose is to help us transform, to grow and transform, and particularly to deal with stuff that we don't necessarily want to deal with, but eventually it becomes a crisis, and we have to deal with it in order to grow, to move to our next step.
Okay,
And
so
that's
a good thing. I mean, Pluto's like it's having a transformative, if I can repeat what you just said, it seems like it's having a transformative effect on the government.
On government, and this is worldwide, but particularly in the United States.
Okay.
And then in the United States chart, because Capricorn rules the second house of finances, values, and income, and how the United States earns its income, and because Pluto was in the United States chart at the time the United States was born. The Pluto was in there. So what we are looking at,
back.
it's doing a return.
It's coming home. It's like the Pluto return.
It is. It is exactly this. We are all here. We are blessed to experience a Pluto return, which is something that only happens once every 248 years. So this is not a common occurrence. And in fact, this is so significant. It has never occurred in the history of the country. We have never gone through a Pluto return.
Because our first time would have been the first time.
Exactly.
So do you think it's safe to say that an astrologer back in that time of 1776, is that right, would have been able to say, oh, well, this is probably what's going to happen in 2008? Do you think they would have said, oh, this is
possibly? I mean, if the astrologer was really an intuitive astrologer, he or she might have seen that. They may have seen, okay, there's trouble here. This is going to be an area that there's going to be things to be
are going to come to
addressed.
surface. Right. That's interesting.
So it's kind of like 248 years of history are catching up with us, and we've got a lot of unfinished business that in terms of how we have conducted. And this is what I see Pluto is really doing in the United States chart as a general vibratory influence, and is that it's the universe coming back, and it's asking us as a government, it's asking us as citizens in a society, okay, what have you done with your power? Because you had this power. This is to create and to create prosperity and to create your wealth. And how have you used it? Have you used it in ethical ways? Have you used it in ways that are sustainable? Or have you used it in covert ways and abused your power and obtained your wealth in any way possible? And have you created structures that are sustainable, or are you using your power in ways that are actually destroying yourselves or the country or the environment?
Okay, so we're being asked. This is like payback time, where we're supposed to look at things and learn and maybe kind of restructure a little bit, even because Pluto's transformative, and we're going to maybe get a little bit more realistic. And how do you think now? This might be and if you're not comfortable with this question, that's okay. But I'm just wondering if we can see how this would play out, because it is a pivotal time with the election coming up. And I don't want to talk too much about the election, but I was just wondering if this would be, if we'll be able to get on the other side of this in a gentle way. Because with Pluto and Capricorn, it seems like maybe it seems a little bit like more,
Well, I think there's a lot of there's a saying that when the darkness is darkest, the light is the brightest. And I think that is very applicable to our time. And so, in answer to your question, on the one hand, things are very dark, and I think they're going to get darker before they get lighter.
Is that because of Pluto and Capricorn?
Because of Pluto and Capricorn, because it hasn't even actually entered the U.S. second house yet. It's in Capricorn, but it enters the U.S. second house in December, and then it'll be a couple of years before it actually reaches its return position. So it moves slowly. This Pluto really grinds us down. It really does the job because its purpose is to bring about transformation, and that doesn't come overnight. That usually takes time and experience and often suffering.
But once again, it's also for us so that, think about when Pluto was in Capricorn last time and we had the French Revolution. Now here, it may have been our first Pluto in Capricorn, but in Europe, Europe is older. Yeah. So they've gone through a lot, and they had the French Revolution during that time. I do know that from some research I had done, and they survived.
Yeah.
They came out in a place where they, had a better sense of who they were, had a better sense of, I guess, equality, perhaps. Mm-hmm. That might be a good way to look at it. But it seems like Capricorn is asking us to grow up, maybe, and to kind of look at things.
Well, it's Capricorn. One of the things about Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and Capricorn involves integrity. There's ambition. Capricorn is connected with ambition. There's the expression of ambition and organization, being able to put things together. Capricorn really gives a facility for that and encourages that.
It disciplines us.
It disciplines us.
Right.
But it also has these very strong values about integrity. And Capricorn, don't forget, Capricorn is connected with Cancer, by polarity. that
Right.
They're
They're opposite
they're
each
polar
other.
opposites.
Right.
And so they are connected by that opposition. It's not a conflict opposition. It's a connectivity with
Right,
their shared energy.
where they share, they kind of fire back and forth
Right.
through each other. Yes.
So
they balance each other
they
out.
balance each other.
Right, and I do know that. This is another subject. I don't want to go on too many tangents, but I believe that America is a Cancer planet. A Cancer
That's right.
country.
That's right.
That is our birth sign. Is we are under the sign of Cancer. So maybe that's another reason why Pluto and Capricorn feels like, oh my God, we're so affected.
I know
But-
it is. You're right. You're absolutely right. And
So
so one of the things that Pluto is bringing up is the integrity of how we operate, how we use our power as a country and as individuals. Of how do we do it? And the individual factor that I see. This is an opportunity for growth. And by the way, this is an opportunity for growth. And the thing is that sometimes it's easy to say, well, if that jerk wasn't in the White House, or that jerk wasn't our congressional representative, then things would be different. Or if so and so wasn't there. Yes and no, but it really doesn't make that much of a difference, because if you took the average citizen and gave them that same position and that same power, they would probably be just as ambitious and power hungry and selfish as the people who we're looking at and that we're bugged with right now, right?
Right. Well, it's interesting because if we're really affected by what's going on up there, then it really, it doesn't necessarily won't make that much of a difference who the players are.
No.
It
doesn't.
sounds like is what you're saying,
Yeah.
because there's still these trends and these learning experiences and these growth opportunities that are going to be played out.
Exactly.
And one way or another, they'll be coming into our consciousness so that we can see it.
And so the real work that I see Pluto doing, Pluto and Capricorn during this time period between really starting with 2008 all the way through 2024, Pluto goes into, or 2025 when Pluto goes into Aquarius, that what it's doing for us individually is it's asking us to look at our values and to see, okay, are our values really sustainable? Are they really serving us? Are they giving us happiness?
Right.
Are we
right.
happy trying to live this material society and trying to live this material life and pursue these material goals that we've been programmed and conditioned to, and which right now completely encapsulate our society? Are these really satisfying us? Are they really making us happier as individuals and as a society? Are they making
Right.
us healthier? Are they helping the planet? We're being asked to look at our values and start thinking about what really matters. And once we start to see that, then, and this is already happening, I believe. This is the light side.
Yeah,
I
let's
think
hear the
there's a
good
lot
part.
of light. There's a lot of light coming in because there's a lot of people who are already looking at this, who've picked up on this energy. There are other planetary influences, particularly Neptune has been going through Pisces for several years, and also Uranus has been going through Aries. And this is stimulating a lot of spiritual interest and awakening people, to making them
Right.
more sensitive to what's going on within them, sensitive to what's going on in the environment, and being more compassionate, being more aware of
can
things.
I add to that? So people will have all these things in their own charts as well, but they'll be in different houses in
Yes.
people's charts. So
That's right.
everybody will be interpreting it individualistically to them, right?
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
right? So yeah, it's
like a dual influence. There's a collective influence, because don't forget, you've got millions of people who have similar astrological planets and signs.
right.
And so they
Generationally.
receive that generationally. They
Yes.
receive that energy, and they're responding to that in certain ways. And so that's one level on the collective. And then there's, like you said, in the individual charts, specifically, where is that showing up for people? So both of those
Interesting.
are happening.
Was there anything else that you brought that you wanted to share? I mean, I know there's just so much to cover with Pluto and Capricorn, but also astrologically for the planet. Did you want to talk a little bit about the different types of astrology that people can do? Now that I think we pretty much have explained what Pluto and Capricorn is, I think.
It's a good start.
It's
yeah.
a good start. It's probably more, but it's a good start.
Yeah.
But maybe you can also take a moment to tell people that you don't just do charts for individual personal charts, but you can also do composite charts for relationships. So
Right.
just as we can see how the planets are affecting the Earth, you can also see, or our country, you can also see how your chart blends with somebody, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Oh, absolutely.
and that's don't they base weddings on that in
Yeah.
India? Like, don't they?
Well,
just get
even
people-
here, I've done charts for several people who were either friends or clients, and when their relationship reached a point that they were going to get married, they decided they were going to get married, and they asked me to come up with when would be the optimal dates for them to get married, and so that's what I gave them, and they used those. And so,
Right.
yeah, and so it does work in many different ways. I mean, there's a lot of different applications.
And I'm sorry, I realize we're running out of time, but there's something that you mentioned to me that I don't want to leave out.
Okay.
When I invited you to the show today and we had our conversation on the phone, you said to me, I'd like to do the show, but I need to run the chart and take a look at what's going on. So you actually said that there was a lot of heavy planets today. And can you talk a little bit about that? About what were you looking at when you said, let me get back to you tomorrow. I'm just going to look and see what's happening. And then you came back and said you want to do it. But I thought, great. So I was just wondering, like, what exactly you saw.
Okay, well, what I did was I went and looked. I looked at my chart to see where certain planets were showing up, because since this is about communication, this is both about our ability to communicate,
Right.
and also about reaching out to
The
the
viewers, you
viewers,
guys.
and
Who you're going to
this
send
for
us
you.
a heart.
Yeah, is this going to be good? Am I
Yeah.
going to be in tune enough with the energy to be able to express ideas clearly enough that some of you, or hopefully many of you, are getting a better understanding of the influence of astrology? And so I was looking to see, well, how are things lining up with the transiting planets in my chart, to see what's happening with that.
But we have a full moon. Don't we have a full moon
Yes, we have
now?
right now. There's a full moon. It started yesterday, and we're still in this full moon. The moon is in Aries, and the sun is in the sign Libra, so they're opposite each other. That's what creates a full moon. And so we've got Libra is an air sign.
Which you told me you have Libra in your chart.
That's right. I have Libra rising. So this is actually
It's good for you.
It is. It's very good. The sun and Mercury are in my first house, so it's definitely.
It's a time for you to put yourself out there.
There you go.
With the first
exactly.
house.
See,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I wish we actually had time to talk about the houses, because I think people might be a little confused by that. But maybe we can just do like a one sentence or a 2-sentence thing about how the first house is how you put yourself out there and people see you. The second house on the wheel would be money, finances. The third house would be home. Home, is that correct?
No, the third house is actually communication.
Communication, and the fourth house is home.
The fourth house is home. There's various things that are associated, of course. There's many different elements that get associated with each house. But yeah, the fourth house would be home. The fifth house would be fun, having fun, children, recreation.
It's also
creative
creativity.
It's creative self-expression. And so that takes many forms. But that's where we have fun, and we allow ourselves to indulge in being creative. That's what it is.
And that's also the house of pregnancy.
That's
because
children.
Creativity and kind of birthing an idea or a project.
That's right.
And then so the sixth house is service.
The sixth house is both service and also health, crisis, and readjustment. Because our health often comes, we don't pay attention to our health until a crisis really starts to develop, and so that's there in the sixth house. And the first 6 houses, by the way, are they're below the horizon in the birth chart. I won't take up time on
No, but that's interesting because that also means, does that mean that if you have a lot of charts in your birth chart or a lot of planets that are below the horizon, you would be a little bit more introverted.
Mhm,
Yes.
mhm,
Interesting.
exactly. So the first six houses are below this horizon line, and so they're the ones that we were just talking about in terms of being more introverted. Then we come to the seventh house, and all these six houses who are above the horizon, and those houses are more related to experiences in the external world and to engaging with the world in different ways.
And that's why the seventh house is the first house that has to do with relationships.
Exactly. So
Yes.
you've got relationships, and of course the seventh house is opposite the first house. So you've got your house of self and identity, and then where do we find ourselves? Where do we relate ourselves? In the seventh house.
Yes.
The opposite. We look outward and we find our friends there, and we make our significant relationships there. And then the eighth house, the relationships develop to a more intense degree of finding out, well, how do we manage these relationships? Who has the power? Who, and that's
so it has to do with, I heard that has to do with inheritances, other people's money, and also the house that might have to do with like death a little bit, or because it's inheritances.
Well, it has to do with death. Usually it's more death in a symbolic way,
yes.
because it has to do with the death of the ego. It's letting go of yourself. And that's why when I talk about finding the balance of power, that in any relationship, when a relationship develops to a more intimate level, because the eighth house also has to do with intimacy, because when a relationship develops to a more intimate level, then people have to find out how much power they have in that relationship and how they share that power.
Yeah.
And so this is not just between two people. This is also in groups of people. And all kinds of dynamics are played there.
And then the ninth house is travel and higher education.
Higher education, wisdom, higher learning, and also in a bigger sense, it's the house of philosophy. It's where you look for your big picture of life. The ninth house is ruled by Sagittarius, your sign.
Yeah, that's my sign.
And that's part of what that's about, is that there's an interest in finding the truth. Sagittarius, and this is why you're doing this.
Yes.
Sagittarius asks the question, what's the truth? Yes. I want to find out more.
I need to know.
Let me talk to all these people. I want to find out more. What do they know?
So then what's left? The 10th,
okay,
the 11th,
so then we've got
the
10th house. The 10th house is a house of career and vocation. And also it's associated with a person's standing in the community. There's a certain sense of prestige that's associated there. And also your contribution to your society, how you contribute. It may not be through your job. It may not be your career exactly, but it's what you bring to your work environment, how you influence that. And then the 11th house has to do with humanitarian concerns, broader concerns, working with groups, organizations, institutions, and higher reforming things on a higher level, bringing ideals into
it's more like group energy.
Group energy.
The group energy.
And what will benefit with the idea of what will benefit more people.
Yeah.
How do we improve
like
things?
It's a very humanitarian house. And then the 12th house always had me a bit confused because I think it's still above the horizon.
I love it.
It's above the horizon, so it's more of an extroverted area of the chart, but it deals with the unconscious and the subconscious.
Well, I'm smiling
which is
because,
so odd.
Well, because there's a couple of reasons. First, I'm smiling because confused is the perfect word to describe it, because the 12th house is the natural house ruled by Pisces, which is ruled by Neptune, and Neptune is associated with confusion, that you don't always see things clearly. Things become nebulous.
Yes.
With Neptune influences, that it's intuitive. It's coming from the 12th house has to do with things that we cannot see. They're coming from another dimension of consciousness, another dimension of experience.
So it could be the collective, like Jungian.
Exactly.
Jungian talked about the collective unconscious.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
And dreams are associated with that because that happens when we're in a different state of consciousness.
Yeah.
And also the 12th house represents also isolation to some degree, like seeking solitude, and that may be voluntary, like somebody who has their sun in the in the 12th house may prefer to be more alone. They may like to work by themselves and prefer solitude, or solitude could be enforced solitude, that a person is put into jail or institutionalized or hospitalized for long periods of time. And it's not their choice, but there's karma there, because the 12th house has to do with hidden karma from the past that we don't see again.
Well, I wanted to let people know, because you've been showing everybody these charts, that it's a wheel and it's got all these, it's almost like a clock, like the 12 numbers of the clock, where there's different houses, and we're calling them houses, but they just look like pizza slices,
right,
really.
Slices of the pie.
They're just like little segments and little parts. And I wanted people to understand what it meant that to have Pluto in the second house. For the birth chart of the United States. And I wanted people, I mean, it's very complicated to look at this. I mean, it looks very mathematical and almost like geometric, really. So it's great that that you were able to bring these. I really thank you for bringing these.
Well,
and
I like
printing them.
I like to show these, even though most people don't know how to read a chart, but I like to provide those and to refer to them. Because it, in a certain sense, I think it validates the astrology. It shows that I'm not just pulling this stuff out of a hat, that there are alignments that are happening, and that they do have significance.
Yeah, so, that there's a true formula. And how old is astrology? We should also mention that. I mean, but if we had to do a ballpark, I mean, would you say it's about 4,000, 5,000 years old, or do we have any sort of?
Wow.
It started by the Greeks, right?
I think it goes much farther.
Further back. Okay.
Yeah. That, I mean, I'm pausing at this because from our understanding of history, we don't even know really where to date civilized human culture and civilization, because there have been so many different discoveries that indicate that there have been civilized societies on this planet going back tens of thousands of years, and that stuff has just been coming out. And so the timeline is really crazy.
Yeah.
Traditionally speaking, we say the Egyptians go back 5,000 years. They say the Hindus go back 5,000 or 6,000 years. But then there's stuff that they found that goes back much, much farther, that shows that there were developed civilizations. And so,
Richard, I think we're out of time.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure I introduce you again, because people can contact you or you can give your appropriate information. But guys, first of all, if you like what I'm doing on Metaphysically Speaking with Mystic Madison, please send me a heart, because that will let me know how many followers I have, and we can come up with new content. I'd love to hear your ideas about, what you would like to see next, or what you would like to talk to people about next. And, I'll do my best to bring those people on the show. But yeah, this is a chance for you to tell people that this is a great astrologer. You and your boyfriend, your husband, wife relationship, you can have him do a composite chart, a date chart if you're picking an important date, or if you just want to talk to him about the things that are going on a societal level. Give your info. That'd be great.
So I'm available at the Crystal Matrix in Atwater Village, and you can go to their website, or you can go to my website. I call my astrology consulting business the Golden Sun. Golden Sun, like SUN, Golden Sun Astrology, and you can find my website under goldensunastrology.com, and that will give you all kinds of information there, and there's a link to contact me, and I would be delighted to carry on this conversation in whatever direction you'd like to go with it, because it is very fascinating, and we don't get enough of an education to understand why we're here. And that's one of those things that astrology, and certainly I practice what I call soul-centered astrology, to really help a person understand, why are you here? What did you come here to learn?
That sounds so awesome. People can do that for their kids. Okay, thank you for being with us. And please join us next week for Metaphysically Speaking with Mystic Madison, and we'll be here.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Great.
Yeah. So we didn't have any problem talking, did we?
Can I use the TV?
Hold on.